Hey, yo, Michael.
Oh, whoa. Two old farts again. Sunday night.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. Now that you mentioned two old farts, I've actually been working on getting some guests for us. So I've got some exciting guests lined up.
Oh,
No spoilers, but yeah, I'll message you about it later. We've got two very
ah,
exciting guests
I
coming up
think I
with us.
remember one. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know, I was thinking about just how we actually resist this whole religious onslaught. And I was and the thing that came to mind is why should atheists actually put any effort into countering religion? And there's this famous clip of Christopher Hitchens when an audience member after a debate asks him, "Well, why do you devote your whole life and efforts to doing this? Why don't you just stay home?" And then Hitchens went off on this litany of of the evils of religion. So yeah, I thought it was interesting. I did some research and looked into a couple of opinions, and I came across this one article which I just wanted to read a couple of the bullet points here and see how it resonates with you. So this is from Salon. I mean, it's quite an old article, but they wrote here, they gave six specific reasons why religion does more harm than good, actually. And I'm going to give you the first one. It says religion promotes tribalism. So first of all, it divides us into insiders and outsiders. Rather than
Yeah.
assuming good intentions, adherents are often taught to treat outsiders with suspicion. And it concludes by saying, believers might huddle together anticipating martyrdom. When simmering tensions erupt, societies fracture along sectarian fault lines. And that was actually a very interesting thing that I encountered, because it's always a us and them club with religion. It's never there's very few of these these little religious clubs that are very accepting and opening to people of all flavors and and colors.
Yeah. And it's quite interestingly among them all. I mean, the people who kicked off the Abrahamic religion were the Jews. And it might just be that they are a lot more mature. Their branch of religion is, how old is Judaism? 4,000 years old or something. And they maybe have matured sort of into old age, and they just kind of accept everybody. In fact, most Jewish people are much more ish than Jew. Um, they don't have that firebrand about them. They're very accepting. They're not trying to get anybody else involved. They mostly are cultural Jews. In fact, most Jews, I think, are secretly atheists, and they're just culturally Jewish. That's their group. And then, of course, the more you work your way up, the younger the religion, the more aggressive and nasty it becomes. Islam is pretty damn. It's going through some teenage years, and then you get to the evangelicals, who are, although they're based on Christianity, their sect is relatively young, American based
Yeah.
and so on, and they. All of them, I mean, as you just said, as you just read there, it's tribalistic, and they want their say, and they are entirely unqualified to have their say. Nothing qualifies them to have their say. The world, religion, or as Hitch actually said, they talk about total. It's a total solution. The Bible or the Quran is a total solution. They'll tell you how to eat, who you can sleep with, in what positions, and when you should do this and what you should do, etc. They set themselves up as being the arbiter of economics, of medicine, of morals and ethics and everything else. And yet, in our modern world, we've got experts in each of those fields. We no longer need a priest to tell us about our sex life. Well, we've got special psychologists in that field. We've got medicine. We've got, we don't need you. You're a hangover from our very deep and dark and distant past. And it's really quite frustrating that we have to even have this conversation and deal with this crap.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. The next one sort of ties in with that, where they say religion anchors believers in the Iron Age. They confuse it. Concubines, magical incantations, chosen people, stonings. The Iron Age was a great time of rampant superstition, ignorance, inequality, racism, misogyny, violence. Slavery had God's sanction. Women and children were literally possessions of men. Warlords practiced scorched earth warfare. Desperate people sacrificed animals, agricultural products, and enemy soldiers as burnt offerings intended to appease dangerous gods. And again, it concludes that section by saying, today, humanity's moral consciousness is evolving, grounded in an ever deeper and broader understanding of the Golden Rule. But many conservative believers can't move forward. They are anchored in the Iron Age. This pits them against change in a never-ending battle that consumes public energy and slows creative problem solving. I really love that thought,
Wow, that's just bad.
Yeah, it's like religion is like progress's retardant. It's like if progress in any form, be it on a societal level, in a scientific level, on an ethical level, if any of that progress was a fire, religion is the fire retardant that just smolders everything to death. I mean, for example, things, in the scientific field only, when you look at biology, things like stem cell research, they're up in arms about that, because how can you harvest the stem cells from the unborn little? And I mean, it's crazy to me how, like the article says there, they're dead set on being in the Iron Age, Bronze Age sheep herders mentality. It's crazy.
But what's the attraction? I mean, I think we really need to understand what is the attraction of that. Why would you want to? Life's pretty damn hard when you're free, but yet you want to shackle yourself. What did Hitch call it? Mind-forged manacles. That you've got. That you actually voluntarily want to shackle yourself to it. Now, you and I are both, white men. I can still understand there's probably some attraction there because we're in the club. We're part of the tribe that have traditionally managed to lord us. But I mean, I don't understand how women and non-white people who have been horribly oppressed by this madness, how do they put up with it? Why do they volunteer themselves into it? It's weird, and it's really what do you call it? It's masochistic, a strange masochistic impulse, which I don't get. I just don't understand.
Me neither.
I mean, I know people pay for that, but I'm talking about a different thing.
Yeah, I was going to say I prefer my S&M under different circumstances.
and I mean, that also brings up another point, is sex. They are obsessed with sex, just completely obsessed with sex.
It's purity culture, Michael, at the end of the day, I think it's purity culture. There's this hankering for the way that things were, in this utopian vision they have of the past being pure and unspoiled, which is nonsense. People lived in abject fear of nature and disease and pestilence, and were slaughtered at the whim of the neighbor. I find it quite ironic how people hanker for the past when it was, in fact,
it's terrible, and it's a bullshit past anyway, because they were full of sexually transmitted diseases. They were full of children born out of wedlock and so on, and they were doing it anyway, and it was just this strange I don't get the right word now, and not ambiguity. They just the word's escaping me now. Hypocrisy, the strange hypocrisy where, the Victorian age, by all accounts, they put up a front of purity, but the reality of what was going on was exactly what we do today. It's just we're honest about it. We just do it. They were hiding it, and I don't understand that. I don't understand why do we hide things from one another, and why is that seen as what is this obsession with purity? I'm obviously a very impure person, so I don't get
it. Exactly. Yeah, it's strange that you mentioned this thing about purity. Like there's this. I think this is also where religion infects our society. When it comes to women, like this whole idealization of purity and virginity, and it's had such a detrimental effect on just women expressing their sexuality in a society freely. Like they. Um, I don't know, but that's a whole that's a whole other topic.
Well, it's even in the language. We talk about losing your virginity. Well, thank God I did, because it was I was a virgin once for 15 years, and then I turned 16. I was so happy. I didn't feel like I had something one day, and the next day I didn't have it, and I felt like I lost something. I felt like I'd gained something.
Your sweet Michael, you unwrapped your sweet note.
I was then, and I remain terribly happy about it, and I hope everybody has a wonderful experience. I don't see the obsession with it. I don't get it.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah.
I just don't.
It's another control measure. Like it's just another way that it tries to control people. Control people's behavior. It's basta. Like I always tell, especially the Islamic flavor, I tell them, I'm not interested in 72 virgins. Thank you. I want 72 hoes.
Exactly. That's 72 mothers-in-law as well. Thanks. Yeah. I don't need that at all.
Right. Third on the list, we have this idea. It says, religion makes a virtue out of faith. Right. So trust and obey, for there is no other way to be happy except within Jesus. So sing children in Sunday schools. The Lord works in mysterious ways. Pastors tell believers who have been shaken by horrors like brain cancer or a tsunami, faith is a virtue. So it concludes by saying, as science eats away at territory once held by religion, traditional religious beliefs require greater and greater mental defenses against threatening information. To stay strong, religion trains believers to practice self-deception, shut out contradictory evidence, and trust authorities rather than their own capacity to think. This approach seeps into other parts of life. Government, in particular, becomes a fight between competing ideologies rather than a quest to figure out a practical, evidence-based solution that promotes well-being. And that is so well put, in my opinion, because that's where the problem lies. Is when you actually have dogma making policy, when you have dogma and blind belief in things affecting policy and affecting the way that people think. It goes completely against science-based and evidence-based approaches to the world. People tend to believe that when there is, for example, a famine or a drought somewhere in the middle of Africa, they'll spend months groveling on their knees for rain instead of making another plan to get some some solution to the problem. I know it's a very bad example to give, but it just it robs people to just keep on believing and thinking that things are going to turn out for the better in whatever aspect of your life, instead of actually going and affecting the change yourself. That's the problem that I have with faith per se.
Once again, we're always going to be coming back to somebody like Hitch because he was just so bloody good. Was it Hitch that said that faith is the most dishonest position you can take, because you're pretending to know what you don't know and can't know, and instead of and faith stands in complete contradiction to knowledge. Once you have knowledge, you no longer have or need faith, and knowledge always wins out, because knowledge is a measure of reality, and faith is a measure of hope. And we all we all need hope, and having faith that my wife loves me or that the sun will rise tomorrow. I've got certain evidence that suggests that I'm right, and the consequences for being wrong are I'm not building my life on absurdity. And again and again and again we see I'll give you a quick example. One just popped to my mind. I had a neighbor, and a hell of a nice lady. She came from a very religious family. I knew them. We were at school together and so on. And she had this little boy, and he was 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old. And as the years went by, I'd see him playing in the garden literally 4 days out of every 5. I'm talking about weekdays. He'd go to school 1 day a week. And I said to him, I'd say to him, "What are you doing home?" He'd say, "No, my mom said I can stay home." These are formative years. And I'd say to her, "How come he's staying home? It's none of my business, but I'm just asking, why is he staying home?" She said, "The world's coming to an end, and he's probably not going to see his adulthood. So he might as well just enjoy himself while he can," because she really believed this in the word bullshit. And where is he today? He doesn't have an education. I don't think he ever got a matric. He just never put in. So now he's struggling through life. She's right. There was no future. She created no future for him. And I think that's incredibly, that fatalistic insanity is she's thrown away his life and his chances. Incredibly cruel, because she had faith. And faith in who and what? In a preacher. And why did the preacher have faith? What was the preacher's upside? Well, he believed the Bible. He had faith in the Bible. So it really all boils back to this one goddamn Bronze Age tribal book of myths that's still holding us prisoner to this day.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Sad too.
Next up, this is one thing that every single one of them are guilty of. It says here, religion diverts generous impulses and good intentions. Feeling sad about Haiti? Give to our mega church. These crass financial appeals during times of crisis thankfully are not the norm, but religion does routinely redirect generosity in order to perpetuate religion itself. Generous people are encouraged to give until it hurts to promote the church itself rather than the general welfare. So each year, thousands of missionaries throw themselves into the hard work of saving souls rather than saving lives or saving a planetary life support system. Their work, tax-free, gobbles up financial and human capital. Besides exploiting positive moral energy like kindness or generosity, religion often redirects moral disgust and indignation, attaching these emotions to arbitrary religious rules rather than to questions of real harm. Orthodox Jews spend money on wigs for women and double dishwashers. Evangelical parents forced to choose between righteousness and love kick queer teens out into the street. Catholic bishops impose righteous rules on operating rooms. It's just, I think we covered a lot of this last week when we talked about how religion hijacks, morality. And this is also, this is the thing, is you look at charities, for example, like Médecins Sans Frontières, like they go in and, it doesn't matter what your religion or, they're not trying to sell you Jesus while they're treating your wounds, or curing your cholera, or whatever it is. And that is that's especially, when you look at, for example, the Mormon missionaries are very famous for doing this. Like they'll move into third world countries and build infrastructure and do things, but right behind the scenes, Joseph Smith is standing with his golden plates. Like they'll sell it to you around every corner. And we talked about a bit of hypocrisy earlier. Like that is the biggest hypocrisy, under the sun. It's like to come. What is it? I think we've going to deliver like 20 Hitchens quotes today, but I really like that metaphor where he says, religion now comes to us with outstretched hands.
Fawning.
Fawning. But it's crazy. I find it very sickly and it doesn't sit well with me. If you want to do good, just go and do good, for fuck's sake. There's no reason to prey on people's misery, and especially someone like Mother Teresa did that very well.
Oh, she was. Did you see? You must have seen Hitch's stuff about missionary position. It was a book he wrote about Mother Teresa, exposing her as a fraud. Have you seen that one?
I have, yes.
Oh, fantastic. Just before we started this, I sent you a WhatsApp with about Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot.
Yes.
And I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure everybody should see it. I mean, I really try to look at that every few months. I open it up, and particularly like to listen to him reading it in that voice of his. And I think that really is the closest thing to a religious sermon that I can ascribe to. The message in there is just really puts us in astronomy puts us in our rightful place. We're extraordinary because we are matter learning about the universe, and we're extraordinary in that way. But we've got this self-importance that comes out of the Bronze Age. And the more religious a person, the more kind of arrogant and at the center of everything that they place humans, and the more educated a person becomes, the more we realize that we are the universe is not about us, the earth's not about us, life's not about us. We're one species that's come a long way, yes, but we also we've got to be a little bit humble. I love that too. They always talk about how humble they are. But the universe was built for me. I'm a horrible and hideous sinner, but God's really interested in me personally, and has built and He's protecting me. It's all about me. It's this strange sort of child. Yeah, and it's this weird childlike. They have some really childlike perceptions, which I just don't get, which I don't think an adult should be acting that way, the way that a lot of them do in their mental state.
No, I agree.
Wait, what's your next one?
No, I agree. When like you said, like listening to Carl Sagan read that Pale Blue Dot just put things into perspective. Like we always, I think it's just the nature of how our consciousness evolved. We are the most important point in our own universes, and but when you look at things in the bigger context, you realize how insignificant. I mean, if you want to feel insignificant, just listen to Carl Sagan's reading of that Pale Blue Dot. Like just to realize, grasp the scale of everything. Everything, pales. All my little struggles in my profession and my daily life and my fight with a neighbor, it all blows out the window when I listen to that, because it's, in the bigger scheme of things, it's really insignificant. You're quite right.
Yeah. I think it'll. I think it does us a lot of good to have those to hold that mirror up to ourselves from time to time,
Exactly.
because we do get uh, we get stuck into our little worlds, and yeah, it's all at once, both it makes you feel big and small at the same time. It's quite a strange dichotomy.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it also teaches you that, the opposite. The opposite of what religion does. Religion focuses you again, like the first point that we discussed. Like there's that whole tribal thing. Like where, it's all about you and your tribe and protecting your tribe from the enemy. Where, when you step out and just consider the holistic view of everything. Those arbitrary divisions between yourself and the other tribe dissolve. Um,
Yeah, and the strangest thing is that they're accidents of birth, because if you'd been born in a different place in a different time, you'd have different ideas. I mean, I'm very much a science-based guy, as you are yourself, and as I think we all are. And science, if you wipe science off the face of the earth, in several centuries' time, it would come back. It would
yeah,
come back identical to the way it is,
yeah,
because mathematics is identical no matter how you express it. The laws of flight, the chemistry, physics, and everything else. Science describes it, but religion. In fact, I'm having an ongoing fight, one of these stupid ongoing fights with a guy on Facebook who poses himself as highly intellectual, and he's always on about always trying to rip science down. Science is terrible and science is awful. And of course, he confuses commercial science, as in, the science that is, sorry, I've got activity happening in the background. The science that is bought and paid for by pharmaceutical companies, for instance, is not pure science in terms of the science that I'm thinking. I'm not theoretical science. It's scientists that are paid for commercial gain, and they're obviously going to be towing company line. That's a different thing. But according to him, science is just absolutely terrible, and I'm trying to get him to understand that all science is a process, and I'm trying to get him to understand peer review. He says, "Well, religion's got peer review too." No, because peer review, you expose yourself, you come up with hypothesis, and you expose it to the community, and all the experts from every scientific branch can comment on it, and their objective is to rip you down. And when they do rip you down, and you don't break off and create a new science, like, well, you take your ball and go home, and you give in and you say you're right. And so there is only one science, but there are thousands of religions. And why? Because we're fundamentally different. Yeah. If people talk, there's a lot of talk as well about scientism, and they try to kind of paint science and as a religion of sorts, or even, in fact, atheism as a religion of sorts. So it's such twaddle. Just because you one way, and you base everything off the emotion, because that's all belief is, emotion of belief, doesn't mean we all do it. We're not the same. No. The worst part, as I always say, is you and I agree. So there's no fireworks.
yeah. I mean, I find it so frustrating. You talk to people, they have this desire to be back in the Stone Age, living, herding cattle and hearing burning bushes, as I always say to them, like, then just put down your freaking computer and, go move into the bush, and, we'll see you in 24 hours when you come running back to civilization.
Yeah, because it ain't that comfortable, by the way, living in our place.
Right, let's cover the next one here. It says, religion teaches helplessness. This whole, what will be, let go and let God. We've all heard these phrases, but sometimes we don't recognize the deep relationship between religiosity and resignation. in the most conservative sects of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, women are seen as more virtuous if they let God manage their family planning. Droughts, poverty, and cancer get attributed to the will of God rather than bad decisions or bad systems. Believers wait for God to solve problems they could solve themselves. This attitude harms society at large as well as individuals. When today's largest religions came into existence, ordinary people had little power to change social structures, either through technological innovation or advocacy. Living well and doing good were largely personal matters. When this mentality persists, religion inspires personal piety without social responsibility. Structural problems can be ignored as long as the believer is kind to friends and family and generous to the tribal community of believers.
Yeah, spot on. It put me in mind, I'm sure you've read Malcolm Gladwell's works as well.
I have not. No, I know who he is, but I have not sat down to one yet.
And Malcolm Gladwell actually talked about, he was just juxtaposing in one of his, this is 10 years ago maybe that I read it, and he juxtaposes the difference between East and West, and the West is dominated by this Judeo-Christian kind of top-down structure, and the top-down structure, of course, is where you've got God, and then you've got a king who was appointed under God, and they owned all the land, and then we were all serfs underneath them, virtually slaves living on not on our own land, living on a king's land, and paying tribute to the king. And the crops that we grew were crops that would they were not in very labor intensive, or rather they had patches of being labor intensive. So you'd plow the land, you plant the seed, and then you'd wait and you'd do nothing. So the kings realized that with all this time on your hands, there was going to be trouble, and that's how they used religion as well to draw you in and make your every waking moment part of religious praise to God via the king. And then you juxtapose that with the East, where it was a completely different structure, where if you had little family plots and they had different types, and it was just the whole structure is actually much freer than our top-down structure has always been.
Sorry to interrupt you. I always find it very interesting how they say God elects the king. It's funny how the king always knows exactly what God wants,
Well, I mean, and there's no wonder then that the evangelicals all back Trump, and they all think of him as Jesus selected. He's definitely God's guy. Well, I want to tell you, I mean, you guys have been on about this Antichrist for a long, long time, and I think he checked every box I've ever seen. A pretender and egotist, maniac, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I mean, he's virtually a king in their eyes too, as you say, and God chose this one too, by the way. Also, the whole notion of chosen people. I mean, I'd be impressed if the non-chosen people came along and said, God appeared to us, and they said we weren't the chosen people. That crowd over there, they're the chosen ones. But it's always the people who are saying, God had a word with us, and we're the chosen people. So listen up.
It's funny how how God's wishes always align with your own.
Oh, yeah. Very convenient.
Yeah.
Enormously convenient.
Yeah. But this is the thing, I always found this whole concept of religion extremely, what's the opposite of empowering? It basically
disempowering.
Yeah,
disempowering.
It subjugates people. It enslaves. It's mental slavery. It robs you of that ability to take responsibility for your own actions, for your own life, for your own destiny. And it's like this. The section opens. It says, "What will be, que sera, sera. What will be, will be." Fuck that. I plan to be in as much control of my personal life and destiny as I can be. So.
But I mean, the clue is right there in Genesis, in the very, very first book, where they've got a tree of knowledge. You may not pick from the tree of knowledge. Right there, they understand who the enemy is. The enemy of belief is
Exactly.
knowledge. Don't go near that tree. And isn't that? I mean, that's geez, that's them. That's them advertising. They do not want you thinking. That is the enemy.
You know, like a while ago, I ran into a YouTube channel. There's a guy who calls himself Snake Was Right. You know, like, and I love that name. You know, because the snake was right in the garden. You know, he said, "When you eat of the tree of knowledge, you'll be as the gods." You know, you'll.
And we really are the gods that they imagined. We are those gods now today. Everything every characteristic that they pretended at a god having, we've got those sort of characteristics about us already. Is there any wonder that you and me don't really think there's a god?
Yeah, exactly. Right, and then the last concluding one here in this article says religion seeks power. You know, think corporate personhood. Religions are man-made institutions just like for-profit corporations are. And like any corporation, to survive and grow a religion must find a way to build power and wealth and compete for market share. Hinduism, Buddhism, Christianity, any large enduring religious institution is as expert at this as Coca-Cola or Chevron. And just like for-profit behemoths, they are willing to wield their power and wealth in the service of self-perpetuation, even if it harms society at large. In fact, unbeknown to religious practitioners, harming society may actually be part of religion's survival strategy. In the words of sociologist Phil Zuckerman and researcher Gregory Paul, not a single advanced democracy that shows benign, progressive socio-economic conditions retains a high level of popular religiosity. When people feel prosperous and secure, the hold of religion weakens.
Yeah. Well, you know, just on that note, the old perpetual, you know, whenever the religious want to trot out the sins of atheism, they will always leap on the communist countries, Pol Pot, Stalin, blah 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 blah. But in all reality, there is probably no more religious country on earth today than North Korea. Yes, admittedly, their God is here on earth with them, and they revere that God. And what are those people and how they kept in subjugation? Through ignorance, and through every moment is devoted to that deity. And the antithesis of that is Scandinavia, where you've got highly educated people who are free thinking. They're all participating in egalitarian principles. They absolute poles apart. So that last concluding piece is exactly right on.
I think with power comes control. You know, so I think that's why religion is so hungry to hang on to power, because when it has got, when it can wield great power, it also can wield great control. Yeah. And that is, I mean, all of us fear in a deep sense losing control of anything. You know, like when you're supposed to be in charge or at the helm of something, be it a mundane task in your life or something as important as managing a multinational company, when you lose control over that, you know, like it puts you psychologically in a very shaky place. You know, like we don't feel security, we don't feel, the autonomy of actually being in control of something. And, religion gives that power to a select few. Like you say, it's this whole top-down approach where there's 2 or 3 people that have got a direct line to God, and God's wishes align perfectly with theirs. And, when they change their mind, God also changed his mind, For example, I mean, how many times I mean, how many times actually, for example, have the Catholic Church rolled back, on things? Okay, now it's okay for for gays to be priests. Now it's okay to get divorced. And and it's every time it's like the Pope goes, I had God on the phone. God's cool with divorce, y'all. It's crazy. But that need to control. I mean, I think what the counter to that would be people. You'll only have people who exert control when there are people willing to be controlled. And
Yes,
I think in this current age that we're living in, that is ending very, very quickly. People
very
are,
quickly.
yeah,
But
people are resisting being controlled by anything.
and ultimately at the base of all that control is money, and that's why the churches have always been opulent, and there's always been gold. In fact, had an argument. I've got another lunatic on my Facebook page, and this week, and he we.
You are like lunatic flypaper by the looks of it.
I love it, and this nutter, he said, I was actually talking about cryptocurrencies, and he came along and he said, no, gold is the only way, because that's God's wealth. God loves gold, because even like Jerusalem or something was covered in gold, and heaven's covered in
Heaven
gold.
is made of gold as well.
So I said to him, do you know what gold is and where gold comes from? Because I do, and I want you think it comes from God. Um, and so gold, anything above iron on the elementary table of elements or chart of elements is made in a supernova. So gold is made inside of an exploding star, and there's plenty of it out there in the universe. But it was just, sorry, that was just a little aside to say that tied up with power, tied up with ignorance, it always comes down to money. And that's why the church always coveted gold, and they still do. And just on that note, I know you're also interested in cryptocurrencies, and I got very interested in it. And I'm really quite interested to understand. The religious have always been terrified of one currency, one world currency. I'm trying to gauge, and this might be an interesting topic too, if we can find one of them. I'm trying to gauge what their attitude is towards crypto, because that is a worldwide currency. It's not issued by any authority. And in fact, today I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but it does kind of play into this whole thing. I was describing to my brother, who's quite a lot older than me, and he just doesn't get it. And he was saying, what if somebody was to launch a new Bitcoin? And I said, okay, but that's because you've got a perception that's a top-down perception, where an authority figure launches a currency and produces and manages centrally. And this started a completely different way. This started where this is a protocol. It's an engineering or an architectural problem. It's an architected money, and miners or who are entrepreneurs put tens and hundreds of millions of dollars into equipment to mine it. They joined. You'd have to recreate that entire network, not centrally, but decentralized. So the part that it plays in this conversation is because money and power go together. And here we've got a decentralized system where everybody is participating, and there's no central authority. And that's what's driving the governments of the world nuts. And I'd like to understand where the religious stand on this. I'd be very interested to know.
I never could get Revelation. Like that whole Revelation where it's fucking the Illuminati, and like the chip in the arm, and the seven-headed beast and whatever. I could never get that imagery, and it's weird, this whole apocalyptic thing that especially the Christians have got going on. They look forward to this. Like I'm not surprised. Like they look at something like cryptocurrency, which is completely decentralized, and it's a global, it's accepted globally, wherever you go, you can use it. They must be shitting themselves, thinking
Yeah.
like, this is a sign. This is it. You're in my holy book on this chapter, in this verse.
Something just twigged to me there, because perhaps all of this stuff is really just insight. And when you've got a church that has collected and is hanging onto all the gold, which is the means in the world of of wealth, or the before paper money, before fiat money, gold was it. And they'd already assembled all of it, and then all of a sudden the governments of the world said, "Oh, well, you know what, screw gold, we're just going to issue paper." And they went like, "What?" So I think that they've always talked against anybody else issuing a different form of currency, or a different form. Beware, don't let them ever bring about a single currency. So I think it's really just self-preservation once again. The church. What's really quite interesting, I don't know if you've studied memetics at all. Just memes. Memes, of course, comes about.
I studied on an abstract level, but I haven't really.
Yeah. Richard Dawkins was the first person to kind of put a name to it. What is a meme? And a meme is an infectious thought or idea. So if I see you wearing those glasses today, and I think, oh, those look cool. So when I see glasses like that, I might buy myself a pair of glasses. So you're delivering to me an idea, or a checked shirt or something. So it could be fashion, or I could tell you a joke. And there's just something in the joke that you feel obliged to pass it along. And that's what a meme really is. And it's become a little distorted in the world of where it's now just little jokes. But that's what memes are. And then memplexes are when you've got lots and lots of memes that all agree with one another. So we could take racism, where I whisper something to you and we have a little giggle, and then I tell you some like shock horror story, and all of those little memes that I give you, be it the joke, be it the shock horror, be it I say, how so-and-so people are. That turns into a memplex, the memplex of racism, and the memplex of religions, a memplex, lots and lots and lots of little stories that all cooperate to build a picture in your head. And now I forget where I'm going with it. But
I was wondering.
But it is quite interesting when you start to look at religion as being nothing but a memplex of lots and lots of little cooperating infectious ideas. Oh, that's where I was going with it, is that a memplex, or mems and memplexes have got this really strange. They've got actually a life of their own, where they move from head to head. They infect people. They change, and they adapt you. They're almost like mind viruses that will change you to their will. So racism is an example of that. It infects a head, and it creates a behavior pattern. It's quite interesting to think of it as a life form.
How it's almost like a virus, that's a thought control virus that spreads through a population. I can never get it there.
But I mean, you and I, we can't get away from memes, because we've got certain way of behaving. We've got certain table manners. We've got certain ways we'll greet one another. There are certain things I could do to offend you now, which would be, I'd be breaking the contract that we've got, the social contract that we've got. So and so they're good memes, and they're healthy memes, and there's not healthy memes, and memes are constantly evolving. But it is quite interesting to think of them as having a life of their own, and having they're almost off on a journey, living in different heads, and adapting. And it's very interesting. There's some really good books on that topic too.
Yeah.
You can hear it's been a long while since I read one though.
I've been dying to get my hands on a good book, so I've been looking around.
On a good book. Yeah. Well, get a book on memes. I'll send you one. I've got I don't have the physical book. I've got it in my Kindle. I'll send you the name of it. It's worth reading.
I'll have a look out for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the big guys at Microsoft who wrote this book on memes.
Ah, interesting. Interesting. Yeah. I'll look into it. But yeah, so I think let's leave it there. We've got, we've covered, six. My whole thing was, why should we oppose, religion? That was the initial thing.
And I think
we've covered quite a lot of ground. We've covered quite a lot.
The short answer is, if religion would mind its own business, we wouldn't bother with it. But it will not mind its own business. I mean, once again, we're back to Hitch. And Hitch, you must have seen the thing where Hitch said to the guy, you can play with your toys. They're your toys. You've got a special house for your toys. And you can all gather and you can play with your toys together. But don't bring your toys to my house. Don't make my children play with your toys. Because I've got toys too. And they've got batteries. And you're not going to appreciate them.
Yeah, it's crazy, And the only thing is, I've gone through several, my intolerance of religion curve has gone through several waves as my atheism ages, and I think I'm at one of the peaks of my intolerance curves. I just. As soon as anybody approaches me with religion, I'm extremely intolerant towards it.
Yeah. And you can believe any daft ideas that you want to. I couldn't care less, as long as it stays inside your head or between you, consenting adults. Couldn't care less. Whatever you want to believe. But the moment you start putting it into practice, into action, and it starts to impact me, and what impacts me is if I see a woman walking around in a garbage bag, it upsets me because it's cruel and it's wrong.
Yeah.
Because I know no woman outside of that culture who do that, so this is not something that that we choose.
Exactly. Who would choose to
in a desert?
Looking through, honestly, I don't get it.
In a desert,
But speaking of which, there's you guys must keep an eye out, because I am going to interview an ex-Muslim, so that is in the planning. And then, like I said, next week we've also got a very exciting interview lined up. So keep your eyes on the Facebook page. As soon as I get it confirmed on Wednesday, I will schedule, and I look forward to it. It's going to be a banger.
Fantastic. Well done.
Excellent. Well, okay. Thank you, Michael. Like I said, let's leave it there, and then we will, we'll pick it up during the week, and I look forward to next week, and it's going to be
okay. Thanks, Dean. All the best. Ciao, ciao.